I ran into my first entrepreneur burning building when I was 21 years old. It was my first entrepreneur experiment. That experiment succeeded. What came out of it, meaning jumping off the cliff without looking at where I was running, but just running, just noticing, taking action, feeling angry and frustrated that I didn't have what I wanted, and having a vision begin from somewhere. It just sort of came to me and saying, well, I'm not going to check the temperature of the water. So, burning building, jumping into the deep end of the icy water without checking the temperature is entrepreneur table stakes. And I call these entrepreneur experiments. And I began the first one at 21. And the result was a lifestyle company. And I was able to do what I wanted. I didn't have to chase money. I didn't have to think about money. I didn't have to think about how to get clients. I just did it. I never learned any how-to methods. I never had a social media influencer sort of course and or training, how to do cold calls, how to go get clients. I just did it because I wanted freedom. And the freedom was do what I want when I was in my 20s. And what that turned out to be was weird stuff and fun stuff and create a lifestyle. And I didn't know what I was doing ever, but I just did it. And then I kept doing that. And I left this environment, which was a family business that I scaled into a real company. So it was me, my mom, my dad, my grandma. I didn't really want to work there, but I wanted freedom. I didn't want to have to punch a clock and rise in a corporate hierarchy because none of them would hire me first. I didn't have the pedigree. I couldn't launch in that, but I really didn't want to. And then I left the family business that I turned into a real company. And because I wanted a real job, because I felt like, I need to get a real job now, even though I was doing exactly what I should be doing. Now I can connect the dots looking back. So why does this matter for you? Because magic happens when you live this way. People show up, ideas get formed, and results move into view. But then something else happens, at least for me. And I noticed this in the entrepreneur stories. It's very similar, story to story to story. You do it again, you do it again, you do it again, then you can't do it again. So you got to do something different. Things change. So my again was I got a real job, which was a business development job. So it was kind of the same. So I've been in that chasing after sales, lead generation, prospecting, my whole life. I don't know how to do anything else, but the way I do it is different. It's completely different. And that's what I want to talk about. I call it how to lower the parking brake. That's what I want to talk about today. So I did corporate and I succeeded again. Took a while, but off of cold calls, I built $1 million book of business for a marketing communications agency. And I had no idea what I was doing then. And the reason I did it is I wanted to prove to myself I could do something outside the family business because I didn't feel a sense of real success, even though in my 20s, I built a lifestyle business that allowed me to go to Spain for a month or go to Poland for 3 weeks or learn Tai Chi and martial arts and join a community and watch foreign films and run around Chicago and do what I wanted. I did exactly what I wanted. And then I had to move on because I'm like, I got to get a real job. And I got a business development job selling something impossible to sell. It's intangible, marketing communication services, because the output doesn't exist until after they buy it. That's really hard to sell. And I did it. And then I was like, I can't work for other people. So I went back and I'm not going to go through the whole story, but this has been my whole life. And the last entrepreneur experiment which started in the summer, really in 2020, and then really accelerated into something new in the fall, came, this is of 2020, came when I realized that it was important to me to get freedom from the cycles of change in the market. And I'd realized, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs do, that you just have to keep doing it. So what's next? What's next? What's next never ends. And I thought, this isn't the life I want. What I want is lasting success, but as an entrepreneur. Because I thought, well, if I could just have a career, like know how to do something, like be a dentist or an accountant or a lawyer or some career in an industry, I'll just get a paycheck and then I won't have all this instability all the time because everything's constantly changing. And then I have to adapt and figure out the market all over again. And it's all technology now and economic cycles, but so much is technology because the technology just changed everything. And so I started my lead generation sales outsourcing company. It's a virtual company, and I did it before Zoom. I did it before anybody had done that. Not anybody, but it just was rare. But I created a virtual company with a global workforce, and it worked. And I thought, well, I wanted to evolve that again in 2020. So I thought I want to create a revenue department because it was lead generation and outbound sales. And I thought this isn't going to last forever. So again, why did that happen? Google changed the rules and it killed it didn't kill the business, but it made it really hard. The headwinds were unbelievable. We could send out an email and get tons of responses. It wasn't hard. We just did it. I figured out how to do it. Custom targeting and like lists. And there's a lot to that. It's much more difficult than you think. Now, if you're going to just spam people, it's all spam. Spam's defined as sending people stuff they don't want. So I'm like, all right, I'm a spammer, but I'm a high quality one. And it worked. I made people money. I made money. And then I realized a lot of people couldn't close business. So I moved on from marketing agencies because it's all another story. But I got into technology companies, technology services, software, companies where the business could close. Marketing agency owners having trouble closing business. They need too much help. Because if they're really successful, they're just doing it based on word of mouth and referrals. So I don't want to get too off track, but there's a point to all this, which is how do you make magic happen? And it has to do with this idea called lowering the parking brake. That speeds up this whole process. And I'm going to get to that. It's important to understand today because we're pushing up against a lot of headwinds. So what happened is I'm at a My Morning Jacket concert years ago, and we're still pissed off they didn't play the song about the librarian, which is why we went. So it was not the best concert in the world, a great band, but one of those rowdy crowds that's not that into the band. They just go to the concert to drink at the Chicago Theater, which is like a great venue. So I'm obsessed with my phone and I'm looking at, not anymore. I got off that, but I'm looking at my phone and my website went down. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So I checked with my assistant and she's like, the website's down. And then I got a notice from GoDaddy, the main host. Your website has been pulled down for violation of our terms and conditions. Somebody reported me. We wrote an email just for this one guy. So he would give us a meeting. And instead, he reported us to the abuse hotline at GoDaddy. And they shut down our website. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And that led to a couple of years of learning about something called deliverability, which if you're doing email, you need to know how this works. It's very complex, and list management. And I won't even go into the details, but we got expert at it because otherwise the business was going to shut down. So I'm at 100 grand plus a month in revenue. I bought a nice house. I finally had stability for a few years. Google changed the rules. They did. And, I don't blame them. People use their services and they don't want people sending them emails in corporate. and they put in all these filters, and they bought a company called Postini, and all these companies started using spam filtering companies. And all of a sudden, and then we couldn't cold call anymore either. We did that. We could, but it was harder. It got very expensive. So the margins got hurt. Now, what's amazing is where that business is today. So now it's a passive income company for 4 years, and it realized the potential in my vision for it in 2020 to turn into a integrated revenue department, not just prospecting, not just sales, but custom targeting, where you have a list of 1,000 people for a client, and you can target now right to the names on the list, but it's integrated from the outbound sales perspective. So it's not passive like content marketing. So it's different, but I didn't finish it. I brought in somebody who worked for me as an equity partner because I didn't want to work in the business anymore, because I'm like, I'm tired of all these changes. How do you speed up the process and, rather than run faster, put the transmission in reverse as an entrepreneur? This is different. It's the opposite. I'm not recommending this to everybody, and I don't even teach it to everybody. What I do is I look at people and say, where are you now? And what is your ideal life experience? And who are you? And how we're going to get you there? And the way you get there is with the group. It's all about the group. Somebody was telling me, like, well, they didn't want to come to my thing because it's like, well, I don't want to go to another networking group. I'm like, I don't have a networking group. So I wrote an article about networking groups. I've been networking for a long time. And this is not a networking group. It's a elevation community for entrepreneurs with a vision that must be realized at all costs. I'm going to die if I don't get what I want. In other words, see my vision happen in the world. It has to, or I can't be okay. I just don't feel okay. That doesn't go away, I'm finding. But when you lower the parking brake, the approach gets different. So I promise I'll get to that. Or coaches who are like, I don't want to be a salesperson or a marketer. I want to coach people. Okay, that's right. Or service providers who are like, well, I'm good at this thing. I just want to do it. I don't want to be the chief sales officer for my company. Well, you don't have to be. You can build it different. You can build it differently, or do that. But if you do it with a group, it goes better. So you don't have to do the lower the parking brake approach, because it's the opposite of what the society teaches. So we have a belief system that to succeed in self-employment, we got to hustle it up. And I've been hustling my whole life. That was my job. In other words, figure it out, do whatever it takes, and grind away in the face of change, adapting constantly as new conditions emerge. And I thought, okay, there were times where that was fun. So if that's fun for you, do it. So a lot of people think I'm against marketing because I talk about that all the time. And I'm not going after Russell Brunson and Tony Robbins and Alex Hormozy and stuff. I have a lot of respect for these people. I'm just saying that there's different ways to do things. And when somebody tells me they have an answer, a how-to method, I reject that because I don't think it's how it works. Not that what they're doing isn't right. It's just, for some of us, we find our own pathway. If you can copy somebody and it works, copy. But still find a group. It works better. Not a networking group, an elevation support group. It's totally different. Totally different. And that's what my article is. So if you go to deep content, go down to Medium, and the latest article up is about networking and how it works. So what's the parking brake? The parking brake is the friction of the world. It's the release of the friction inside that comes from being in the friction caused by being in the world. It's based on some really deep spiritual and philosophical underpinnings, which I talk too much about. So I lose people. But I'm learning to communicate more clearly because I'm tired of losing people. And what I will say is that when the parking breaks up and you run faster, it hurts more. And there's a moment where you can't anymore. You can, but you just don't want to roll the boulder up the hill. You're kind of like done. It's not necessarily just age, that's part of it. But the idea of surprises after success will help you understand this. The stories of, and I have them, I got what I wanted, and then I fell off the cliff into the next phase. That's what happens a lot of the time to entrepreneurs. And then I picked myself up and I went back to my ways of that got me success. And there was a moment in the story where the person says, well, this doesn't work anymore. That's what happened to me multiple times. Well, what's next? So the parking brake lowering is to shift awareness from the market to self. It's to shift awareness. It's to say, instead of how can I get what I want there? In other words, in the changing economy, the changing technology ecosystem, in the market, how do I figure out how to market? How do I figure out how to convert? How do I figure out how to network, do lead gen, on and on and on? How do I work on my business, not in my business? How do I become more productive? How do I work on my mindset? There's a shift from that into something different. That's the new state. Many do it progressively. Others, like me, jump all in head first. I can't help it. Some dip their toe in the water. Again, don't be like me, be like you. However, if you feel that parking brake is on and you're pushing forward, you're suffering. You're suffering. These are the people who are forcing themselves to do the work. That is a mistake in judgment at a certain point. If you force yourself to do the work and it's fun, that's where you are. Go chase. I did it for years. It was fun sometimes, but it doesn't ever, I believe this is true, ever lead to lasting stability in a marketplace. What does? Lowering the parking brake. Why? Because you become yourself. You become more deeply who you are. There is an inner purpose that emerges. Where does it come from? A creative place. This is the secret to this. So the book, The Secret, I don't think it's the secret. I think that's about creating from imagination and recognizing thoughts are physical. That's true. I know that's true. I created these businesses from having it. Larry Ellison did this with Oracle. I'm listening to the biography on the podcast Founders Misfit Feed, which is an awesome podcast about entrepreneurs. And I'm listening to Larry Ellison. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm actually like that guy, which surprised me. I'm like, I'm like him. Different though. But not as rich, believe me. But I don't care about money like he does. I don't care about money. I just want enough money where I have prosperity so I can do whatever I want. Money's the byproduct for me. It's always been that way. Other people want to chase money. Alex Hormozy, it's about going from 100 million to 1 billion. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That's where is it interdirected? That's the key to it. Lowering the parking brake means noticing self-awareness of an inner conversation with self around, why am I here? What do I want to do here? Who do I want to be with? Why do I want to be with them? What do I have to offer them? And the experience of friction is an inner experience, not a figuring out how to get people to do what I want. All the greats do this. Steve Jobs, in a way, not always. Walt Disney. And this is what's taught by people like Napoleon Hill and Bob Proctor and in different varieties. So what's the secret? The secret is the gift is underneath the pain, feeling, experience. It melts. This is the secret. it melts. The iceberg inside are the beliefs. The iceberg inside are the burdens. They're trapped in the body energetically. I know this. I've been doing Tai Chi martial arts since I was in my 20s. I can feel that release. And when it releases energetically, you re experience something. Feel the re experience, and you'll see your life in reverse. And you also see your future. That's important. So as you lower the parking brake, you engage in the future. Whose future? Our future, the future of humanity, because that's creative energy. As you release block stagnant energy, which is your beliefs, I have to do it this way, my life has to be this way. If I don't, it's going to be terrible. I may lose everything. I need wealth to feel secure. It doesn't matter what your belief is. The belief is inside your body, locked in the body system, energetically. When the beliefs are examined, my beliefs, now you may be different, but I've never met a human being who is. So I'm going to use subjective language. So I don't want people to think, oh, well, what is he? How does he know? Well, I know because I did it. And then I studied it and observed others and corroborated in all of these traditions, wisdom traditions, mostly spiritual, all of them that I can find. And then stories from entrepreneurs and other successful people like Gandhi and Mother Teresa. I'm like, oh, that's how they did it. Nelson Mandela. I'm like, oh, that's how he did it. The inner directed life is different than being in the market trying to figure out how to get what you want for an entrepreneur, but you're in the market. I don't want to live in a hut and meditate. My spiritual development pathway that I've been through for 4 years now was not what I chose. It chose me. Being able to read and understand the Tao Te Ching, to read and understand the Buddhist sutras, to read and understand Course in Miracles, like I'm reading a comic book, was not what I wanted. I wanted enough money so I didn't have to think about money. I wanted to do my experiments and have fun in the marketplace, creating entrepreneurial ideas. That's what I wanted. Instead, I got an inner iceberg melting experience that led to a spiritual development that was beyond anything I thought was possible in the world, even though I'd read about it. And to see so clearly into these mystical traditions feels like an inner power for a purpose. So what's the purpose? Freedom from hierarchy. So for me, the purpose is, how can I, as an example, take the arrows and become liberated from the hierarchy of the society that trapped me in belief systems, and in so doing, create an ideal entrepreneur experience that doesn't change ever. It's prosperity as the market shifts, because I'm with my people, not marketing to them. That's the difference. Now, that's not for everybody. I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not dealing red pills. So people are like, well, you like Morpheus? And you think you're like Morpheus? No. Morpheus he wasn't a drug dealer. Somebody showed up, Neo, and he helped him because he'd been through it. I don't wish this on anybody. Russell Brunson in the Secrets books talks about this. He said, I took the arrows in the back for you guys. You, the funnel hackers. I took the arrows in the back for years. Took years to figure this stuff out. I took the arrows in the back for the entrepreneurial community of people who have a vision and are suffering around pushing the boulders up the hill around that vision. I had to go through all this stuff for a reason. I know what the reason is now. That's what comes when you melt the iceberg. You go down deeper through all that pain in the body and release and release and release. The pain turns into a joy and lasting success, even if your life experience doesn't completely change overnight, because it's the friction leads to the elevation inside. So the rejection for me over all these years of climbing social media mountain, which I started in 2020, and figuring out how to create a revenue department where marketing, sales, lead generation, and prospecting merge into one company for under 10 grand a month. I got there, but I didn't finish it. My partner finished it. It took him 4 years after it took me 6 years to get the company going into that 7-figure level. And then the craziness that comes with the collapses. And now I'm like, wow, you did it, man. Because the technology got better. So you can micro target in a different way. So, okay. Well, I couldn't lower the parking brake to do that because that's not my destiny. So there's an inner destiny with a purpose attached to it. I'm going to stay on for 10 more minutes to talk a little bit more about this and behind the scenes stuff. So rather than run faster, I put my transmission in reverse. How do you do that? You slow down to speed up. It's weird. It's a paradox. And the reason people struggle to read or understand these mystical traditions and the kinds of stuff that the ayahuasca does, the microdosing, I don't need any of that stuff. The microdosing does, the ayahuasca does, the meditation does, the inner work does, is because you live in paradox. So the mind can't understand paradox. The self accepts paradox as our human condition. So when I got to paradox, I'm like, oh, so pain doesn't exist because it's not one dimensional. So there's no pain. So it was like, what's underneath the dark well of being? And the end of the Matrix is the example. So how does Neo win the battle with Agent Smith? He jumps into him. That's what I did. I jumped into my pain, and the pain releases into elevated experience of joy, and then the pain comes back again, but it's another pain. And you go through that again and go through, and then that becomes life. And then there's moments of transcendence, of elevating past the duality of that mechanism, of that condition of opposites. Okay, this is good. This is where it gets mystically confusing because you can't access this through your mind. You can only access it through your feeling experience and the creative place of thought. Those are two different things, but they're interconnected. When I read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, I thought, I'm an artist. And I thought, so are you. If you're an entrepreneur with a vision, you're an artist, not a business person. I'm a lead generation guy. That's what I did my whole life. A lot of cold outbound stuff. I did it myself, and then I built teams to do it, and then I did it for other people, and then I did it for my own companies, and I'm good at it. I don't want to do it anymore, though, because I changed. And I want a permanent solution. And I don't want to figure out the algorithms anymore and the technology. I just want to be with my people and run experiments and have money to do it all. Prosperity, that's called. It's a feeling of prosperity, which includes money. Not easy to do because you're in a gap often between knowing success is inevitable and having the money come in the bank. The gap's the hardest part. And Rhonda Byrne talks about that in The Secret. But again, the secret is lowering the parking brake. She doesn't talk about that as much, but she does. Napoleon Hill talks about it a lot more when he talks about the demons and the inner truth inquiry stuff in that book. That's important. So releasing through truth, through knowing yourself, through asking those questions, those Socratic Buddhism's an inner truth inquiry process. That system of inner truth inquiry leads to feeling experiences you may not want to have. That's the parking brake release. Because with the feeling experience, so if I look at the stories, what happens after the collapse? I almost ran out of money stories. It was all over for me and I gave up stories. What happens afterwards? Elevation. Why? Because the spiritual energy is trapped inside and it's intelligent. That's the mastermind. That intelligent energy is where the ideas are. And we're all in the same ether of that intelligence. Grab your piece of it because that's what's next. And when you're in that flowing energy, you live like an artist. Well, people are like, well, artists are starving. Not necessarily, but entrepreneurs can figure out how to do business. So you can have it all. But you got to lower that parking brake to get there. All right, I'm going to explain this using, I think I'm going to do the Gene Keys chart, and I'm going to explain this system because it's so powerful and important. But again, I'm not suggesting you do it because this is so heavy duty, but simple that a lot of people are not going to want to do this because it's parking brake lowering. And I wrote a bunch of articles about parking brake lowering, and we use these ideas on the campus, which is not a networking group, my God. It's an elevation group. Now, say it again. So the idea of the Gene Keys is what Richard Rudd did, who created it, is he took the I Ching. He was an expert in human design, which is a very powerful system with some gaps in it, holes in it. One of the biggest holes to me is you have to learn their language, which is like, well, no, you should speak English instead of talking about things like manifest generators and reflectors. And it's like, no, don't make me learn your language. So what Richard did is he took his expertise there. He had spiritual enlightenment kind of experiences, knowing there is no enlightenment, which is when someone says that, I'm like, oh, you get it. Because I know there's no enlightenment because you don't get anywhere. You just become yourself in the world to do something, transcend your limited self, in other words. So it's not just about you, it's about us. It becomes an us project. That's what the Gene Keys is. It's how to get to us. There's a genetic upgrade in the code. This is cool. So the genetic code is codon rings, which is firmware update, the update of humanity, which is going on right now. But there's also your own genetic code, which is an update. The feeling experiences and the creative thinking energy is how you get there. You lower the parking brake to get there. So that's what this system is. So I've worked through it extensively and I'm almost transcending it now, but I'm still using it. So the art of contemplation is the starting point. And I just simplified it because I try to simplify everything for entrepreneurs because I don't want to do all the spiritual stuff. I want to get a result in the world. So I'm using this for a purpose, which is I have a purpose and a vision. I want to see it realized. I want the results, but I don't want to sacrifice and compromise to get them. So I'm not going to explain Richard's stuff. I'm going to explain how I used it and then how I adapted it for entrepreneurs to make it simpler. But if you're all in, like I am and some of the others in my group, buy the Gene Keys stuff and do it. It's awesome. So I created this idea just from Richard's ideas and others of a three-legged virtual stool. So the virtual stool has three legs. One is notice, the other leg is adjust, and the third is calibrate. This is the opposite of how I used to live and how most entrepreneurs I see live. So most of the conversations are how to go do this, how to go do this. They're very sped up in the mind. And then people do an ayahuasca weekend and then come back and speed up again. Or they'll meditate in the morning and then speed up throughout the day. But that's not how it works. So the creative doesn't operate like that. So the artist doesn't do that. The artist is in the energy of the intelligence where the creative ether is. Notice. So the best way to think about it, I think, is jazz. So what are the notes between the notes in real time? In other words, in the moment, you don't have to meditate, just slow down a little and start noticing. When you see something that catches your attention as an entrepreneur. Now, my process for this is called More Money Now, which is kind of a pun because it's about keeping your attention and focus on money without chasing it. But you can chase it if you want to. So I got an article on that. I won't explain it all. So the idea of going into the marketplace, and noticing is where you do it. So you create in the marketplace and in the laboratory. You go back to the lab, go out in the market, back to the lab, out in the market, noticing. Then what happens when you see something? You adjust in real time. So get rid of the opinion, the belief, the conviction, the direction, the goals, the objectives. I just get rid of it. The productivity over time. If you need that, use it. But over time, you might want to get rid of it all, like I did, and then just look at it and say, adjust now. Boom, going here now. Because I'm like, oh, I like that idea. But I'm not distracted and going in tangents and chasing shiny objects. That's different because I've noticed, in other words, I'm connected to self. This is the inner work, is saying, okay, this feels right, this feels right, this feels right. When you get into a this feels right stage, that's called prosperity. And then you know you're going in the right direction, even if it feels weird, because it feels right. And then you don't want to do anything else, even if it doesn't seem like it makes sense, because it does make sense from an inner directed standpoint. So I know this is confusing, so I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So make it tangible. If you go to Richard's website, you get what's called the hologenetic profile. Here is mine. And I worked through these paths. So I worked through these 3 pathways, and then I bought this book so I've read all the gene keys, but I don't just read them, I experience them. That's the point. I'm releasing the parking brake by experiencing this stuff. And then what happens is we get to calibrate, which is the third part, where I change and then the world around me changes. And then my job is to calibrate with that world. In other words, my market. I didn't know who my customer was. And I was using marketing exercises, which is what I've done my whole life, to figure it out. Create your avatar and your segments and your psychographics and demographics and all that. Now, my other company will do stuff like that. But for me, it didn't work because it became an artistic project. Notice, adjust, and then calibrate. So I'm like, who am I here for? Course in Miracles was really helpful for this. So I got to entrepreneurs of the vision that must be realized. I get it. Coaches, they're tired of selling. I know those people really well. Service providers who are sick of shitty customers and just want to do their work. And they don't want to work on the business. They want to be the business because they want to do the work, but they don't want to be burdened by the business. Those 3 groups. I'm like, oh, that interrelates. That's it. So I figured it out by being in the market through self-awareness and releasing the parking brakes of these barriers and burdens that I've got to figure out the marketing. I got to get up on social media mountain. I got to make it happen. If you like that and want to do it, do it. Just be aware of yourself as you're doing it. Is this working for you? Meaning, are you sacrificing or compromising? I'm not trying to talk anybody into anything. I'm trying to help people understand that it's a one-off project. So as an individual, following somebody else's footsteps is problematic. You can do it for a while and learn, but at a certain point, you got to face yourself. That's what I'm saying. So life's work, that's 36.3. The pearl sequence is at the top. My life's work is about liberation. My brand is about liberation. It's freedom from the hierarchy. And my shadow around that is provocation. So I trigger people. And I want to release myself from that and move through dynamism, which is my gift, into liberation, which is being outside the societal barriers of the matrix of society's beliefs. Liberation. Point 3, 39.3 is the gene key, but point 3 is how it works. So line 3 changer is use more humor and lighten up. So I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do that. It feels right. I've been too serious. Okay. Well, there's a triangle here. Then there's culture. What's the culture? 3.2. The shadow is chaos, which is, I don't know what's going to happen. Well, that's real life. So embracing chaos and being okay with it, using innovation to transcend chaos, and then moving into the state of innocence. What's innocence? It's a kid playing and doing experiments. And I'm like, that's what I want. The culture 3.2, 2 means do things in partnerships. So I'm not a group person. I'm a group person with partnerships. So I create the group. That's what I did, the campus, but I do partnerships in the group. So I'm involved with everybody, but I work really well that way. So that's part of my, so in the I Ching, that's called the hexagram. So 2 is the hexagram partnership. 3 is the gene key around innocence. So that's my culture for the business. And then the vocation is what I'm doing in the business, 17.1. Line 1, production originality. I have to be an original creator. An original creator. I can't copy anybody. That's me. Yours is probably different. Maybe the same. 17.1. Point 1 means the production has to be original. I can't copy anybody. And I haven't. What's the shadow of this? Opinion. So Gene Key 17 is about opinion. My shadow is opinion. I'm super opinionated. Where do the opinions come from? The confused mind. What are they connected to? Judgment from the mind. What does that do? It projects out onto other people. Don't do that. Don't do this. Think like me. No, I got to watch that stuff with my vocation. So this is the triangle of life's work, your evolution, and your vocation. So opinion turns into what? Farsightedness. I got there. I've always been there though. But then I go back into opinion. Farsightedness means being an entrepreneur and being in the creative energy of what's next. I didn't know I was an artist. I thought I was just doing lead generation and sales and marketing and building entrepreneur businesses. Omniscience is what comes next. Well, that sounds scary. Like, what does that mean? Omniscience just means seeing it. So seeing through the clutter. In other words, transcending form. So 17.1 is about transcending form. Well, what do you get? You get the pearl. See, the pearl's at the center of the pearl sequence. What's my pearl? 2.6. This is a little scary, but exciting. Line 6 is nature. When you're a line 6, and I've got a couple line 6s in here, so my pearl line 6 means it's not about money. So I'm on the cutting edge of not about money. And that's hard because I have to integrate with nature. This is very, very Zen, Buddhist, Taoist like. Be like water, my friend. Very Bruce Lee like. So I've studied a lot of martial arts and Jeet Kune Do, but not going out and fighting martial arts. Inner work. This is Karate Kid stuff. I've been doing it since I was in my 20s because I was preparing for the Pearl 2. So Gene Key 2 is 2.6. My Pearl is the shadow is dislocation, is being, I don't fit anywhere in the society. I can't fit in the matrix, any of them. I've always been like that. That's why I had to work for myself. I didn't want that. I didn't choose that life, but I did. That's the paradox. So it's hard. So you have paradoxes, believe me, because that's how life works. That goes to orientation, which is all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can see a direction here, which was entrepreneur, experiment, lead generation company, sales outsourcing company, passive income company, experiments in 2020 online. How do you create a revenue department? Now, then solopreneur, revenue climber, solopreneur Inc., and finally the entrepreneur experience, Red Pill Pathway, which feels like the cementing end of the pearl. Where does it lead? Unity of what? Everything. The feeling of being in unity with the society that's hard to be in. Going in the friction every day and saying, I'm okay. It's hard. Believe me, it's really hard to be in a society where people are suffering and struggling as entrepreneurs. I want entrepreneurs to rise to the top and take over everything. That's my dream. But what I really want in the Pearl is realize the experience of unity where we come together and help other people do the same. And that's what my group's all about. It's not a networking group, but you get business, but it's all about coming together in a greater energy with a deeper purpose where you retain your own vision, but you're together with people around a shared desire. And that is achieved by being yourself. And you don't have to lower the parking brake to do it. You just have to